Very good.
Okay, thank you.
So, so some of what David shared is a little bit like Rachel's former, but it's all basically the same information. But I think even before we share, so one of the reasons you haven't heard about us, we just launched this organization about a month and a half ago. Now, we've been working on it for a year. And the reason we've been working on it is because all three of us, as you heard in our bios, are activists. And we have been doing community work for decades, really, around activism, but all of our organizations that we came from and came out of were nonpartisan. And after the redistricting effort that Barbara was a big part of and All In for Democracy, we worked for 7 years. And I mean, and many of you probably were a part of that. We testified, we got a study committee out of the legislature, we got a bipartisan agreement to begin to look for an independent commission to draw the lines. For 7 years, we rallied and testified and worked, lobbied with the legislature. And it just blew up and went nowhere. And that was as we moved to 2020. And so we had already had the 2016 election and all of that terror. And then we were in 2020 before the 2020 census, and we failed to get the bill passed that we would have needed to get passed in time to impact the 2020 census so that we could get some decent maps by 2021. And it occurred to me at that time, we need a new form of activism because many of the legislators that we are lobbying with, that we are making relationships with, or we're working with, they really are not listening to us, and they don't have to because of the way the state is gerrymandered and who it is that they really are faithful to. So the three of us, somehow we had all connected over the decades, but we found one another about a year ago. And all of us were basically just covering our heads with blankets going, I can't deal with this anymore. We're just going to hell in a handbasket and I don't know what to do about it. And so we decided to stop crying about it and mobilize and think about it. And so we've been working for a year about what would be a way to somehow make a difference in this state, to begin to shift the super partisan stranglehold that we have at the State Department and to move into a more of a democratic form of, or to protect our democracy. And so we've been working for a year, and it's just the three of us. But what we're trying to do is build a grassroots movement. And so we need your help in doing that. We're trying to be influencers through our Substack publication. And so we'll talk to you a little bit about that. So we really don't have a website. We have a Substack publication, and we'll talk to you about what that is, and how you might be able to be a part of this movement. So I'm going to share with you just a few things that sort of gives you the background information of how we came together. Rachel's got some really good census data on voter participation, and then we're going to turn it back over to all of us to begin to problem solve relative to some of the ways that you can be more effective in the goals that you have around reducing gun violence, reducing easy access to guns. And so I'm going to share my screen really quickly, pulled up to the beginning of the slideshow. And so, as David said, so I don't need to reread it, but we really are, we are trying to impact voters. And so in that sense, we are not truly nonpartisan because we're hoping that voters will make decisions about voting for those candidates who are protectors of democracy. And so in our Substack publication, and we have a new post just coming out next week, we are going to be calling out particular candidates that have been on the record or are on the record leaning towards authoritarianism and against anti-democracy values and norms. And so in that sense, we, three of us, and our Substack publication will lean more towards actually supporting a candidate that we feel is a candidate that's supporting democracy. And all of you, and this, David, this is going to just make good sense to you as a political science major or professor, but what became clear to the three of us because of our work in advocacy and in the political sphere, it became so clear to me that when I was working with the All In for Democracy coalition, our state and our country has become a minority rural democracy because of structural things that are in place. Because of gerrymandering, so we have a supermajority state house, when in fact Indiana citizens are more 55-45 divided as far as partisan split. But the state house, both in the Senate and in the House of Representatives, or the representatives, are more of like a 75 or 80% supermajority of Republican rule. Voter suppression has been an ongoing drumbeat in Indiana. Started with voter ID, with needing to do ID for voter registration. The Electoral College is where we can get an elected official without the majority vote, elected candidates without the majority vote, and the structure of our Senate in the legislative branch of our national government. So we have to understand as advocates that we really are operating under a minority rural democracy at this time. And the presence of dark money in our processes has been a significant factor in creating an ultra-conservative Supreme Court that is legislating from the bench. And we even saw that in this past decision that came down, or the arguments that they heard the other day, when they were saying, well, there's no standing for the anti-abortion drug, so we really can't. It doesn't seem like they're going to rule in favor of that, but they were sort of giving hints about, well, there's a Comstock Act you all can come back before us on, and we're very interested in that, right? I mean, as you listen to those arguments, so we're in trouble, I think, from our Supreme Court and how they seem to be more and more partisan. And then all of these structural aspects are supercharged by the emergence of MAGA extremism within the GOP and the presence of those extremists in our own Congress and our own state houses. So it's because of these things that the three of us became clear about. We kept saying to one another, there has to be another form of advocacy during this time of extremism. And we didn't know what it was. And we've been talking with the Indiana Democratic Party. We've been talking with the Donor Roundtable. We've been talking with some national organizations that are trying to bridge the divide between urban voters and rural voters. We've done training on how to message and how to be able to be in conversation with our brothers and sisters who may not be as progressive as we are, but who are beginning to become aware that it's not only an issue-based election, but it is moving into an election where we are going to either choose a democracy or choose a dictatorship. So we have been doing, that's the kind of work we've been doing over the past year as we tried to figure out what our one little piece of this corner could be. So we know that democratic societies support basic civil and human rights. They support the issues that citizens care about, gun violence, for example, reproductive freedom, clean air and water, LGBTQ plus rights, those kinds of things. We know that authoritarian societies ensure that the concerns of those in power is what is prioritized above the needs and the rights of its populace. And we also know that our citizens are more united than they are divided. And that there is a common ground that exists across the political divide. And we believe that our work and what we're trying to do through our education and advocacy, and now primarily through our printed Substack publication, is to find that audience and speak to that audience so we might influence them in thinking about, when they go to the ballot box, what are they truly voting for or against. And so we know that in this era of extremism, that we can't advocate and lobby in the way that we used to. And we believe that as activists, we have to be clear-eyed about this, or we're going to be naive, and the things that we most love and we most care about aren't going to be heard and aren't going to be acted upon. And so we can differ in our opinions about certain issues as a pluralistic society and as citizens, and that's what a healthy democracy does. But if we don't have a democracy, what we care about won't matter, because what will matter is what that strong man or strong woman cares about. And that's what will happen through the society. And those of you who have majored in this and spent your life's career on it know this way better than I do, or the three of us do. So that's just sort of the backdrop of why we came together. So we're very modest. But what we know, and we'll talk to you after we've had some conversation about how you can help us create this movement that will hopefully then make a difference when we move towards the 2024 general election. We know that it's about voters. It's about the only way that Rachel Maddow said this so brilliantly in her most recent book. That the only way that if a democracy that's being attacked from within, the only way that you can save that democracy is through democratic means, as long as you have those means. And so it really is going to be at the ballot box. And so Rachel has some really good statistics that she got prepared just for you all this evening to talk to you a little bit about our voter participation. And so I'm going to turn it over to Rachel and let her share some of that. And Rachel, you know, I've sort of split this into two. So if you need me to advance to the next slide, just let me know.
Okay, that sounds good, Debbie. Yeah, so this slide includes a table of voter turnout and voter registration by age group and by Indiana, and then compared to the national rates. So you'll see that we don't do very well, and that's probably, you know, could be attributed to some of the things that Debbie mentioned earlier, gerrymandering, voter suppression, and so forth. Debbie, I'm just going to talk about the next slide, but keep this slide up. So in 2020, Indiana ranked 44th among U.S. states for the percentage of eligible 18 to 24-year-olds who were registered to vote, and we were 43rd for the percentage of that age group who voted. You'll see in the third column there, only 48% of eligible 18 to 24-year-olds in Indiana were registered to vote in 2020, and only 39% voted. In contrast, we found recently that of eligible 18 to 24-year-olds in New Jersey, 87% of them were registered and 75% of them voted. So that's we have something to work towards. What is interesting, and I did this calculation just today, is that once individuals are registered, they're more likely to vote. So in 2020, among 18 to 24-year-olds who were registered, 80% of them turned out. The recent Indiana Civic Health Index, which some of you may be familiar with, estimates that there may be up to 1.7 million Hoosiers who are not registered, and the vast majority of those eligible voters are young people who have aged into eligibility since 2020. So we can just go ahead and skip the next slide, Debbie, and then go to the one. Yeah.
And so one thing I want to say to underscore what Rachel just said, what we can make available to you is this slide show in a PDF form. So don't worry about taking notes. We'll just save this as a PDF and get that to you. All right. I can see Jerry smiling because it is a lot of data. And so just know that.
Yeah. Also, I should have said at the beginning that it's been a little while since I did this kind of work, since but I'm a little rusty, but it felt good to get back to it as well. One of the ways that we're, in addition to increasing civic knowledge, civic awareness, and literacy, is civic engagement. And obviously one of those ways is to increase voter participation. We are struggling with, and I think other folks do as well, with how do we identify and convince unregistered and high potential voters in our state that their votes matter, especially in the face of gerrymandering and voter suppression. And through our conversations, it's been suggested that we connect college students via other organizations and connecting them to student groups, local League of Women Voters chapters, and other groups that can host focus groups, voter registration drives. I think Debbie, you had talked about perhaps encouraging participants in those meetings to sign a pledge that they will vote, perhaps sign a pledge that they will get others to register and vote as well. And then with high school students, it's been suggested that we connect with government history teachers, administrators, faculty, sponsors of student organizations such as SAD. And I should have said at the outset that we welcome your suggestions and your feedback as to how we can work with others to increase voter registration and voter turnout in the state. And if there are other groups that we should be talking to, or if there are other modes of identifying and contacting high potential voters, we would like to be aware of those and then be able to share those through the Substack newsletter.
So I'm going to stop sharing and tell you just to, let me see if I can get back into the big form here, the big meeting. Anyway, I'll keep it small. So what we're doing as a movement is that we're building an allyship with other organizations like yourself. And what we're asking your members to do as individual members, not so much as representatives of Hoosiers concerned about gun violence, but as members who are also citizens, to subscribe to our Substack, because what we are doing every time we post, we give some very pithy and important information. We talk about why it matters. So we're doing meaning making around this. So it's just not a data dump. And then we say, what can you do as a citizen? And the recommendations that we make are very, span the whole continuum of just subscribe to newsletter or Indiana Capitol Chronicle or host a house party. And what we also do, we provide our readers with this just plethora of resources from across the country that are doing amazing trainings on messaging, how to have a house party, how to talk to your neighbors who are politically opposite of you and do it in a way that you can be heard and that you will hear them. So we will offer all of these resources to help build capacity across the state of Indiana to really become a grassroots movement. The League of Women Voters is an ally of ours. They're going to be sharing our Substack with all of their members. So I know for real that the League has an amazing chapter both in Lafayette and in Bloomington and up in South Bend, but South Bend's a little more moderate than perhaps Lafayette and Bloomington. You all could partner with them and have some kind of voter registration pizza parties or some sort of forum to talk about gun violence or the threat of democracy that's happening. The League could be there to register these young people because the state has made it very difficult to register college students. And then you could all create maybe a pledge card where the young person says, I've registered and I pledge to vote. So that's what we're trying to do in building this allyship, is connect people who already have an infrastructure already on the ground and continue to protect your nonpartisan organization by not blatantly being partisan, but your members can continue to be really good citizens and continue to build grassroots support across their own networks. And so that's sort of our methodology of how we're trying to build this movement across the state. And we really welcome your insights, your suggestions, and your comments about what you're hearing and what's occurring to you in light of what's been shared so far. And so I'm going to turn it back over to David to sort of help moderate the conversation.
Okay, yes, that was fascinating and important. I want to take the prerogative of chairing the session to raise the first question. I see we've already got some hands up, and if you'd like to ask a question, please use the little hand raising caption. Do you all know how to do that? As Larry Kane has done. I see you waiting, Larry. So, but my question, or really more is an observation about the connection between what you're doing and what we're doing. And I think there's a lot that come up when you talk about this, and there's two in particular elements that strike me. One is your focus on minority rule democracy. And boy, the gun issue so clearly manifests that, because for decades, a majority of Americans and even a majority of Hoosiers have supported the kind of common sense gun control legislation that our group supports, and so many other groups, the Moms group does, and many other groups do. But we have gotten zero support for that from this unrepresentative legislature of ours. So this, you're right on with that. And this is a sort of a perfect test case of that particular issue. The other way that all this relates, I think, is even maybe a little more disturbing, is that the gun issue is right in there with these extremists that you're talking about. Because for a long time, for decades, the NRA as an organization, and even more, a particular subset of NRA members, so I'm talking about the most fanatic members who are opposed of the gun community that are opposed to any kind of legislation. Many of them believe, and some of them say, that they need guns because if the political system becomes what is, in their view, is unrepresentative of them, they have the right to alter or to abolish it, which is language from the Declaration of Independence, not from the Constitution, and that the Second Amendment gives them the right to use guns for that purpose. So a lot of these people, these MAGA people, believe that they have a right under the militia clause to overthrow the government, and that guns are for that purpose. And I think we saw that manifested, with the assault on the Capitol. So these people, it was these people that thought they were using their constitutional rights to overthrow the government and the Constitution. So, boy, so that, your group's concerned about extremism, and we're fighting extremists, the worst kind of extremists, those who believe that the guns are there not for self-protection, but to protect what they see as their constitutional rights. So I don't know, would either of the three of you like to respond to that before we go on and have questions and observations from others?
Well, I just sent you all, David and Jerry, just an article, like at 6 o'clock this evening. It just came to me through Mother Jones, because I follow Mother Jones. There is an intersectionality now that is happening among the Christian nationalists and the more fundamental Christian religions. And I guess that there is, and you'll read about this and can share it with your members, that there is an influencer who has thousands, if not millions of followers, who are saying that it is a God-given discipline to use guns and have guns to protect what's most sacred and most valuable. So the extremism now has an intersection point with very conservative religious groups. And so it's everything that you're saying. And so it's real. And that's why, as advocates, we have to do more than rallies and send a letter to our congressperson, because some of those are the same extremists that we're talking about. So questions, other questions or comments?
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll call on people that have raised their hand. And I see Larry has had his hand raised. So Larry?
Thank you, David. And I have to say, I am extremely concerned about what was just discussed about the extremist mentality on the use of guns to maintain their majority rule. Very, very disturbing. I recognize very, very acutely the minority rule issue. As a climate and environmental activist, we've run into the same brick walls in the legislature as you're describing regarding gun safety, etc. But my question for Debbie was, she mentioned about subscribing to the Substack. I have no idea what that means, so need some help.
And then Barbara Burke had her hand up. No problem. If we have your permission, we will subscribe you. But what Substack is a new platform that many influencers and folks who are talking about the very same thing we're talking about, that's the way that they get their information out. So Heather Cox Richardson, Ruth Ben Ghiat, David Korn, Dan Rather, and I'm not going to remember all the others, but it's a platform that is both web-based so that you can go to our Hoosiers for Democracy page and see all of our posts, but it's a newsletter that lands in your inbox. And so that's our advocacy and activism tool. And so and it's not algorithm based, which is why we love it. So you don't fall down that algorithm dark hole of social media, if that makes sense. It's a new platform that's been out 2 or 3 years. Many influencers are using it as a way to build momentum and build a movement. And that's one of the things that we're going to ask you all to do, and we will send you all the information about how to subscribe. And we only post about every 2 or 3 weeks, but then it's truly chock full of resources and other places that you can link to and connect. And then what we want you to do is to send that to your neighbor and your crazy uncle at the dinner table, right? And your faith leaders and your Chamber of Commerce people, so that you begin to build. It's network building, not institution building. You build your own ecosystem of networks so that people continue to get this work, and that's one of the ways that we'll build the movement. All right. And Barbara, you had something to say.
Yes, I just wanted to add, because both Larry and Teresa have been a part of our social interface social action group. And what we became so aware of is all of our interests fall into silos, whether it's gun violence or whether it's the environment or whether it's homelessness. And the reality is we're all beating our heads against the same wall because of this sort of forced minority that does not get a voice in government. And so that's what we were trying to find, was a way to unite the silos where we could talk to people in all of these silos, and you could get the word out and get the information out to people who are in your silos. So there starts to become a larger group that can form a movement that will stop some of the craziness that's going on.
Mhm.
Paul?
Yeah, I agree with everything I've been listening to so far. Some of you may have seen a piece on the PBS NewsHour last night that sort of speaks what we've been talking about here. There was a group in Tennessee. It was a national organization, went into Tennessee and brought together 11 people on 2 sides of the gun issue to have a conversation. And in that small group, the process had wonderful results. People talked to each other, found some common ground, and then tried to take their conversation to the Tennessee state legislature, which absolutely didn't want to hear what they had to say. They wouldn't even talk to them. So that's a product of the insularity of these gerrymandered districts that know they're safe and don't have to listen. But it also speaks, I think, to the power of networking and bringing small groups together to have conversations and begin to build a movement that can challenge that. The other thing I think that's worth thinking about is what kind of issues are capable of bringing people together. And over the past few years, we've seen that women's bodily autonomy, Black Lives Matter, both of those were issues that for a time brought people from a variety of different places together. I think climate change and environmental threats are another one. And if you can bring those people together to address this issue of how and why our democracy is not addressing our concerns, then you have the potential to challenge those representatives who won't listen to small groups of people, but might listen to a larger movement. But that's, you know, it's a big ask to get there, and it's going to take time. But it's worth this sort of effort to try and nudge ourselves in that direction, I think.
Larry, is your hand newly up or is that your old hand?
No, it's newly up.
Okay, go.
Paul's comments reminded me of something I had thought about when Debbie, when you were speaking earlier. You raised the question, the conundrum of how to identify unregistered voters. I don't have the solution to that, but I have volunteered with a group from time to time that you may have heard of, who apparently do have the solution to that. The Environmental Voter Project. I don't know if you've heard of them, but
Oh, we haven't.
they have a process by which they identify two groups of people, and they look for the coincidence of those two groups, the
Okay.
intersection, if you will, of those two groups, and that is people who are very committed to environmental values and so forth, and those who of that group are not registered.
Okay. Is this a national? Is this a national?
It's essentially a national group. Yes.
Okay.
Environmental
if-
Voters Project.
Project. Okay. Do you know if have they been working in Indiana yet?
I don't think so, because
Okay.
they're focusing primarily on U.S. representatives and senators in
Okay.
the key states, the battleground states primarily.
Okay.
Indiana is not that. So
Is there any person that you've with that organization that you've worked with, or?
not a name that I could pull out right
Okay.
offhand, but
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
sure they can be found online. If you
Oh,
can't
yeah,
find
yeah.
them, let me know, and I'm
Okay.
sure I can
Okay.
find them.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah.
It's just grace that the three of us got together, because I'm a writer. Barbara is an amazing organizer and political. She just keeps us all focused, because Rachel and I can go off into Never Never Land in a nanosecond. Barbara keeps us home, and Rachel is an amazing researcher. She's also working with a group called Civitech that also is helping identify unregistered voters. They're sort of expensive, but she's been working with them. And if we find that they're going to be helpful and affordable, we'll take, or not even that, we'll take this information that she's finding to the Indiana Democratic Party, because they are a partner and colleague of ours. And some of what we're also trying to do is focus on those districts that we really could flip, mainly because of the Dobbs decision and the IVF issue that's coming on board, because we're seeing that those issues really do get voters out. Alabama case test this week. So we're going, and anything that we find out about any of this will be in the Substack publication. Margaret, you have your hand up.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name is Margaret, and it's nice to be with you all tonight. The question that I have is, I understand that this is a brand new movement you're trying to get underway, but do you have any ideas about how we might reach the uncommitted voters? We saw the phenomenon in Michigan, and it's growing. And I'm concerned about the way, in particular, that the U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East and elsewhere in the world hasn't changed for about 75 years. And when I speak with young people, I mean, people who are like, 20, 25, they just say, it's got to change, and it's time to change, and we're going to change it. So I'm curious about how this, the laudable goals of this particular movement might find our way into the uncommitted minds. And that's my question. Thank you.
I think that is the question, right, of where we are in this moment. Now, one of the things that we've been learning as we're listening about messaging is to see things as they clearly are. So there's uncommitted voters. There are also high potential voters because they really do care. And so it really becomes, Margaret, a messaging tool as much as anything else. It's like, how is it that we can be in conversation with these folks? First of all, we need to find them, right? And that's why some of these tools might help. But we know that young people are very, very somewhat dismayed and say, my voice won't matter anyway, so I just, what's the point? And we've got to be able to be in conversation with them to say there is a point. And here's what you can do. But I think it's messaging, I think it's relationship, and I think it's finding those people. And that's why we need the networking kind of thing that we are trying to create. And it's about community. It's about being able to be in conversation with those people and get out of our own echo chambers, right? And be connecting with folks who might be an unlikely or an uncommitted voter. But there's no easy answer. I think that is the quintessential question. Anyone else might have a comment?
Debbie, I just want to make certain that everybody really listened to the comment you made before this huge question was asked. And that is that in our discussions with the state Democratic Party, and we talked with, I think, everybody in top level positions there, they have identified the 4 districts of House representatives for the state legislature that they want to flip to get rid of the supermajority. And it's because of the supermajority that no matter what the governor does, the legislature can do exactly what they want to do. So if we can get rid of the supermajority, it gives the governor more power, and the Republican majority will have to deal a little bit more with the minority party. So that's where it gets down to, we want to connect with people across the state who are in these different districts, that they can alert and build networks in their districts to go and to flip these ones that we really have a chance of changing and making a difference in the kinds of laws that go through our legislature.
I'm hearing in the chat, Barbara, what districts? Can you name them off the top of your head, or can we just promise that we'll get them to them post this meeting?
Oh, we'll get it to them. I know there's 2 in Hamilton County and one in one in Boone County and one in the Bloomington area.
And so one way, actually, and that's where the movement really gets on the ground, where the rubber meets the road, identify those places, and we'll help you do that. Identify your members who are in those places, connect with other great organizations that are already there, and then volunteer for the candidate and go door knocking and texting and just volunteer for the campaigns. Because it is door knocking and conversation that's going to make the difference. And what we're hearing nationally from people who are doing this work on a big picture level is like focus, focus, focus. Don't get overwhelmed, and don't waste your resources by just distributing them all over the place. And so we can get you the name of those districts, and we're going to continue to name those out loud in our Substack publication, as well as the candidates that might be more vulnerable now because of Dobbs and the IVF issue, because there may be some seats that we could flip that we never thought we could flip before. Jerry's got your hand up.
Figure out how to unmute. There we go. Turn the conversation just a little bit. I was really interested, I think it was in Debbie's bio, the reference to, I think they were probably congregation-based discussions around the Parker Palmer book. I'm just really, really interested in that as a way to engage people when they're in a thoughtful environment. One of our friends, she's not with us tonight, but first time I met Karen, she told me that she was a member of what most of Indianapolis thinks of as a pretty progressive congregation, but that she knew within that congregation that there was a very deep divide over guns. Just because they were a progressive congregation didn't mean that everybody agreed about how to solve gun violence. And so, my goodness, what an opportunity to have that congregation and others similar in constructive, respectful dialogue. So I really like that as a way of interacting with people. The other thought, and I told the three of you as we were sharing thoughts about this forum tonight, we have a real special interest in engaging young people, and especially around their confidence in democratic action, small d democratic action. And so I would just like to hear your thoughts about that. You know, we're real. We've Becca has helped us get real connected to the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council. Wonderful young people whom we're just delighted to know, but they're a pretty small slice of the population, and so I think we all know people in our circles and friends. Young people who have really kind of given up on the country, even leaving the nation, or if they haven't left the nation, they've decided not to have children because they don't want to bring them into this environment. And so, I just am just interested in hearing people's thoughts about how to do a better job of being in communication with young people.
I wonder if we could hear from Pierre Atlas about some of these things. Pierre, former political science colleague, teaches a course that's pretty much slam bang on this issue, isn't it, Pierre, on democracy and gun control or something like that?
Hi. Yeah, I teach a class on gun culture and policy at the O'Neill School, formerly known as SPIA, at IU Indianapolis. And I also teach a regular class on terrorism and public policy, where in that class we look at international terrorism, but also domestic terrorism, and some of the intersectionality that you guys were talking about before between kind of like the more extreme gun culture and domestic violent extremists, DVEs. We get into that. Actually, going to get it in both classes. There's an intersectionality in my two classes where they sort of dovetail just a little bit there. But yeah, I'm teaching it again, the gun class. I'm teaching it again in the spring. It's a class I created after I joined IU. Dave and I were colleagues. I was an adjunct at Butler in political science years ago. And then I was a political science professor at Marian University for 20 years. And this is my third year now at IU. I switched over. Actually, I've not heard of, until tonight, until Dave invited me, I had not heard of the Hoosiers Concerned with Gun Violence either as an organization. So I'm really interested in learning more about you guys as well, maybe, offline, I guess, with Dave. I bring in guest speakers into the class, including Paul Helmke. Last time I did it, I had Ryan Mears, the Marion County prosecutor. I had people from more of a pro-gun perspective as well. Boone County Sheriff, the instructor for the handgun self-defense course, I had him come in as well. And it was very interesting. You're talking about young people. The class, when I taught it last year. My students ranged the gamut from people who had no opinions on guns whatsoever, who believe assault weapons should be banned, didn't understand why there's a Second Amendment, to some very, very ardent pro-Second Amendment students, including some who I don't believe they carried in the classroom, but I knew they carried off campus. And so we looked at a lot of different things. My particular research area is of late is the relationship between frontier mythology and American gun culture, kind of like the imagery of the Wild West, which actually wasn't as wild as it is in the movies, and how and all of that, and also comparing the U.S. and Canada on guns. So it's really interesting. I'm listening to you guys. It resonates with me. I'm a gun owner myself. I'd call myself a moderate gun owner. The types of policies you guys were talking about earlier on about limiting access, I completely support. And I've written about those. I write a monthly column in the Indianapolis Business Journal, and I used to write for the Indianapolis Star before that. And I've written multiple columns related to gun issues as well as academic stuff. Yeah, so and also the stuff with the Hoosiers for Democracy, very much agree with that. We look at those kinds of things in some ways. I mean, I do a whole unit in my terrorism class on January 6th, looking at that and what aspects of it actually might qualify as domestic terrorism as opposed to other types of things. And we look at political violence and, you know, all this kind of stuff. So really everything you guys are talking about is already in my classroom in one form or another. So I just find this very interesting. So thanks. And thanks Dave for inviting me. I didn't know anything about either organization.
Pierre, is there something we could be doing or to get more of the students at IU registered to vote?
Well, I know that the campus does voter registration drives. You know, I think it's more, in some ways, it's really more a question of I would say peer pressure. People, you know, students who are already committed to voting, encouraging their friends to register. I mean, I know that they have voter registration drives and things like that. I mean, frankly, you know, in my classes, and I know a lot of other, clearly at the O'Neill School, where we're a public policy school. I mean, there's a strong interest in that. You know, if you want to have an impact on policy, you have to vote. I mean, it's the most critical thing you can do, the most basic thing you can do. And so we certainly encourage it in that sense. But I think if, you know, wherever there are young people already registered and already active, they're probably the best way to reach out to other young people to get them to register. You know, old fogies like me aren't going to have that much of an impact, I think.
Yeah.
You know, it strikes me that this whole issue of trying to get young people involved, it's always been an issue. And, you know, young people have never participated at levels that older people have, but it's gotten worse and more difficult, more troublesome, I think, for a couple of reasons. And I mean, one of them right now is because the two candidates for president are super old, right? And, you know, a lot of people are turning off this election because of that. And the second issue, I think, is the active disinformation being promoted, and especially coming from foreign powers, from the Russians especially, but maybe to a lesser extent from the Chinese. But, you know, the Russians basically killed Hillary Clinton's campaign with different disinformation that, you know, that basically tipped the election, I think, for Trump. And the CIA has already said that they think that they're going to be even more involved in this election. And it's not just trying to tip it toward one person or another, but I think it's deliberately sowing cynicism and factionalism. And this is, you know, the young people are particularly susceptible to this, and it's going to make it even more difficult, I think, than usual to try to engage young people in this election. I don't know. So what are your thoughts about that?
Oh,
I know that Erin had her
I'm sorry,
hand
are you
up.
asking me or who are you asking?
Let's start with Pierre. I was actually addressing to everybody, but Pierre,
sorry,
since I sort of followed up on you, let's start with you.
Well, I'll just say real quick, one of my main concerns about the 2024 election, besides the potential for political violence and chicanery and all that kind of stuff, is low voter turnout on the Democratic side. You know, I think once again, you know, if everybody votes, Trump will lose the popular vote again. But obviously, we all know how close it's going to be in certain swing states. And I think that if some people don't vote because of apathy, because of the fact that they don't want to vote for two, octogenarians, because of Gaza or whatever, especially progressives who don't show up or don't vote, even if it's just a few thousand in different places, Trump could become the next president. Also, if some of them vote for a Cornel West or a RFK Jr. or whatever, those things actually concern me, because Trump is not going to increase his voter. He's not going to increase his appeal. I really don't think so. I think it's a question of whether Democrats show up and vote. And for all those progressives who are concerned about other issues, now on the other hand, abortion and the women's issue, that's going to energize Democrats, and it has every single time. But for a lot of the progressives who are complaining about various things, whether it's not enough on the environment or Gaza or whatever, pardon my French, but I would say grow the fuck up. I mean, this is a future of democracy election. Suck it up, vote for Biden, don't vote for a third party candidate, show up and vote, and worry about what happens next afterwards. And I would say that for moderate Republicans as well. You know, the Republican Party needs to be, I'm a former Republican, it needs to be reformed radically. Focus on the 2028 election for that. For any moderate Republicans, you know, this is a binary choice. Either you're voting for Trump, and who knows what's going to happen in a second Trump term, or you vote for Biden and you suck it up and deal with it. And that's, I wouldn't say that in my classroom, but that's my personal thought anyway.
Erin has her hand up, and then Paul has, but Erin, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I can't change my name on my iPad for some reason. My name's Erin Kelly. I'm with the League of Women Voters of Indianapolis. I also happen to work for an organization on IUPUI's campus. So just a couple things just to kind of backtrack a little bit on the idea of youth voters. First off, it's always really important we check our assumptions about who we want to engage when those people aren't part of the conversation. So just kind of scanning the Zoom screens here. I mean, I'm 50. I don't know that this call is filled with youth voters. So I think the number one thing is to just make sure we remember to check our assumptions on what they're thinking and what they're doing. And as Debbie had said, to break out of our own silos, or to leverage those silos to get connected to young people. So I would say, so I'm part of an ad hoc political engagement group on IUPUI's campus. You guys might be surprised to learn IUPUI's campus actually has one of the highest rates of student voter registration in the nation. Students are registering at IUPUI, so always check those assumptions. To make voting easier, about 3 election cycles ago, we got a polling location on campus for students. So, because of course we all know that just because someone is registered doesn't mean they will go to vote. So think about your own silos in some of these universities. Think about your silos, who you know. Do those people have connections to high schools and universities, and try to work those conversations to encourage those students to get out and vote. And then from there, I mean, I really, one of the things we found at the League of Women Voters, and this has taken years of us being in high schools, going to government classes, talking to teachers, registering students in high school cafeterias, but we're piloting this year an initiative in only 4 high schools, but that's something, where we have members who are mentoring young people to talk to students themselves about voting. Because the reality is there ain't one of us on this screen who's really going to convince a young person to go and vote. And they've got to hear it peer to peer. But that's where you've really got to look at your networks, who you know, and just kind of work down the line to get to those young people. I really think that's one of the strategy shifts that we've got to begin making. Like, we are not going to be the ones that get these young people to do this. We've got to find ways to get young people talking to young people.
Yeah. So for instance, that program, those 4 high schools, how can we find out about that program and share that information with other places in Indiana, or sort of be the vehicle to do that, or
Yeah. So I'll be real honest.
Yeah,
This group has been honest in their conversations. It's a pilot phase right now.
Yeah.
So we're not ready to start broadcasting things. We also, based on conversations that I've had with some of our members who are doing this, we need to first make sure that administrators, principals, and teachers are comfortable with what we're doing, and that we are strictly nonpartisan and all that kind of stuff, because this is Indiana. And all it's going to take is one administrator, one parent getting wigged out by something before the rug gets ripped out from underneath us. So I'm going to be honest, I'm not willing to start overly promoting what the league is doing right now, but I'm telling you, it's working for us right now to find a connection to a teacher who can help you find out who a young person is who really cares about these issues, and then working with that young person, because we don't,
Yeah. So
that's an idea anybody can take and grow.
Is that so? How do we identify those teachers?
Pick up a phone call, Rachel, and call people and try to get a cup of coffee with them. That's grassroots building. There's no quick and easy way to it. It's relational, and it is time, and it is commitment, And it is sitting down over and over again, sometimes with the same person repeatedly having the same conversation.
Wow.
And it's frustrating as hell because the world is burning. This is an existential election we have coming up in a few months.
Yeah.
I realize that,
Yeah.
but it's
It's,
just
and
gotta
it's just
take time.
something that I was a co-author on the Civic Health Index in 2015 and 2017, and we're still talking about the same issues, right?
I know.
That doesn't change. Yeah, I'm aware of the IUPUI program that received recognition. Is that being replicated on other campuses? Again, one thing that like Debbie and Barbara alluded to is that we don't want to, we are not interested in, you know, duplicating anything that's going on ourselves. We just want to make other folks aware of what's going
I
on
know,
out there.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I can, Debbie, I know well, I can connect. I know you too, Rachel, but
Yeah.
Jennifer Boehm, who is
Okay.
Vice Provost VP of the Office of Community Engagement, has been
Yeah, I know
instrumental
Jennifer.
in coordinating this stuff on campus. So
Okay,
I would connect
okay.
with her.
Okay, just to find out if that's being replicated on other campuses. That would be great. Yeah.
Paul. I think you're next.
Yeah, I had a thought when Pierre was talking. I mean, one encouraging thing right now about the upcoming election is that I do think that the Biden campaign has figured out that they need to make this an election about defending democracy, and that will speak to young voters, at least potentially. I moved here from the West Coast, and ever since I've been in Indiana, which was the 1980s is when I moved here, it has struck me that Indiana does almost nothing to inform its electorate about upcoming elections. I mean, there's very little in the newspaper. The state pays for nothing to get information out to voters about what's on the ballot and what they should be concerned about. It's just make it difficult. And, I think the same is true about bringing young voters into the process. But I do think that that's gotten worse in the last few years, that the Republican Party in particular is interested in discouraging college kids from being able to vote in the places where they go to college. And, at Butler, I know IUPUI is a different situation, but I can remember a couple of elections ago hearing from Butler students who, because we have a voting place on campus as well, but they would show up to vote and be told that they didn't have any official Indiana ID, so they couldn't vote. And their Butler ID wasn't good enough. That wasn't accepted as a proof of who they were. So that's an issue that has to be addressed down the line. But I agree that getting a hold of teachers who will serve as advocates, and probably the best route to finding out who they are is for people to talk to their own kids and find out, at your school, who are the teachers who are sympathetic to these issues, who should we go to get some help in pushing voter registration movements. So those are my thoughts to the last couple of bits of our conversation here.
Any other questions or thoughts?
Dave, Margaret again, could I pose another question to the group, please?
Sure. And Margaret, why don't you identify yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
My
should have
name
asked
is-
people to do that.
Yeah, Margaret Brabant, also a retired professor, political science department at Butler University, political theory and American politics and women's studies and everything in between as a generalist. So this is another question. Thinking about focus. Is there anyone in this particular meeting that's focusing on the efforts of someone like U.S. Senator Jean, I think it's pronounced Sheehan, it's Shaheen, who was from New Hampshire, and she has been working pretty diligently to try to overturn the Citizens United versus FEC decision. And as we all know, that's the one that really turned us into an oligarchy. And I'm
Yeah.
just curious if anyone is trying to figure out how we can overturn that horrific decision.
I mean, the group at the national level that's probably working on that most is Public Citizen.
Replace a few Supreme Court justices.
Yeah.
Yeah, what we're finding there are a lot of amazing national organizations that are doing important work around these kinds of things that Margaret, that you brought up. I think that for those of us here in Indiana, I think it's so important that we really focus on where are those areas that there's high capacity for turning it over. I love what Aaron said, is that we have it's a peer-to-peer contact. I mean, they're not going to listen to us. But for those of you who have children or grandchildren or on a school board, or who know a teacher that you go to church with, or, you know, whatever, it's like Aaron said, it's just unbelievable, total community organizing. Now we're doing some work here. Rachel has been, I know why she asked that, because people are not answering her emails, people who have these connections, but she's going to keep going, right? And we've got some meetings that we've set up where people that we know have connections across the state with schools, to ask this very question: what can we do to support students, to help get the message out about the importance of this election, and to begin to build their own networks. But I just think it's being clear-eyed about where we are at this moment, and then building capacity at those local levels, and building the movement.
Does your group work with students, SAD, or no, SAD, sorry, Students Demand Action?
Rachel, repeat the question. What about?
Oh, does your group work with Students Demand Action?
We're trying to, learning to
Okay.
a little bit. That's a
Okay.
pretty new relationship for us.
Okay.
We have a relationship with the North Central chapter of Students Demand Action.
Okay.
And recently, through one of our board members, we have a board member who teaches in Bloomington, and he introduced us to the SDA chapter at IU Bloomington.
Okay.
And in fact, that young lady told me that she was going to be here tonight, but she isn't.
Okay.
But we'll follow up with her, because she
Okay.
was, you know, everything she had to say to me was quite enthused.
Okay.
And I think we're still trying to figure out where those SDA chapters are around Indiana, because every now and then someone will mention one that I hadn't heard of before.
Okay.
So that is on our list.
Okay. Yeah.
There's one at Heron High School, and there's
Okay.
one at Burris in Muncie.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, because
Yes.
it was Burris students who met Lucas.
Yeah, there was
Yes,
that.
it was I've been trying to get in touch with the Burris folks to get in touch with them as well. But I do think
Yeah.
those are very important organizations to connect with.
Yeah, and just for us to so one of the reasons I asked is that in, you know, searching Google, I found that the Students Demand Action for North Central is hosting a voter registration drive. They already did. And I think it was maybe last weekend or so. But if there are ways that we can amplify what other folks are doing, you know, through the Substack, we hope that would be helpful.
So if I could just add, Hoosiers Concerned is partnering with multiple organizations on a peace walk April 27th. And the Heron Students Demand Action is actually tabling at that event to register voters.
Okay. Oh, great.
So I want to thank the three of you, Debbie and Barbara and Rachel, for this very interesting presentation. And thank you also for your work on this. I mean, you know, every little bit helps.
I've
We're all
told
working.
Debbie and Barb that it's a coping mechanism.
Yeah. And
you know, that's selfish on my part.
In this area that we're working on, you know, where Jerry mentioned, I've been involved with this for more than 30 years, and boy, it gets disheartening, because you not only don't make progress, you regress. But I think you just need to keep chipping away and making a difference where you can. And the place that you're working, I think, is extremely important, and trying to get people to vote. As Pierre said, that's the thing that's going to make a difference in this election. And if it's just one of the things we have to counteract is the cynicism that so many of us tend to feel in the face of these overwhelming odds. But it's encouraging that you all are working on this so hard. I want to turn it back to Jerry, and I don't think we've said anything about our own youth initiative yet, have we, Jerry? I mean, maybe Jerry Paul could say something. Could say something about that.
Yeah,
because
our
our group has also got a specific initiative
thank you.
involving youth. So maybe, I don't know, one of you can say something about that.
I'm going to ask Paul to say something about that.
Sure. And I'll probably be getting in touch with Pierre directly to talk more about this. We're putting together for this June a workshop that we're calling a youth leadership initiative, focused on the issue of gun violence and gun safety and gun advocacy. So what we're hoping to do is to bring together a group of 8 to 15 high school students for about 2 weeks on the Butler campus for 8 or 9 mornings in the first 2 weeks of June, to address issues around this question of gun violence, to get them to think about it, to talk about it, to reflect on it, to try and elicit their voices. Because at least for me, I grow increasingly convinced that the debate nationally about gun violence is simply stuck, and that the key is going to be to move it into a different place. And if that's going to happen, it's going to happen because of young people. So I'm with a small group in the process of finding presenters to come in and talk with these young people. We also have to find the young people. That's our next task, is to get the word out and recruit people to participate in this workshop.
But we're going to pay them.
We are going to pay them for participating, and we will pay the presenters as well. Some of whom I've got lined up, but we still have a few slots to fill up. So if anybody is interested in learning more about this, please drop me an email. You can see my first initial and last name on the screen right now, and my email address is just phanson@butler.edu. And I'm working away day by day to try and put this thing together with the help of Jerry and Dave and a few other people, Becca as well. And we're making progress, we're getting there, but the work isn't done yet. But we're excited about the prospect of getting together with a group of youth to address some of these issues.
Yeah, great.
What did you say that the age range is for
our target? 15 to 18 years old, I think, is the age group we're targeting.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, we have aspirations that this 2-week workshop that we're doing in June will grow to something maybe larger, but more to the point, repeated. We hope that what we do in June is the first of an ongoing effort to engage young people around gun violence and democratic action. So thank you, Dave, for asking us about that. I'm going to take the liberty, because we're very, very close to 8:30, and so I'm going to step in at this point and do a little bit of a closing with us. First and most important, oh my goodness, we are so excited to have met the three of you and to know about Hoosiers for Democracy. Very exciting, and we hope, I think I'm safe in speaking for all of us, the Hoosiers Concerned folks, that we want to cultivate this relationship and figure out how we can continue to know each other and support each other and look for opportunities together. it's too big a topic to bring up at 8:28, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm really intrigued with something that came up kind of briefly in our meeting this evening about a broad-based coalition around progressive issues that have synergy together. I don't know what that looks like. It's easy to say those words, but I don't know what it looks like for it to happen. So I hope that we try to learn what might be happening in other states if there are coalitions between gun violence and women's health and the environment and other issues that we think have synergy. The other thing quickly is to say we had a lot of comments put in chat. And so after this evening's meeting, I'm going to lift those notes out of chat and I'll just share them with the 18, 20 people who were here tonight. And because some of, chat comments come up so quickly and then they're gone and you maybe miss them. And so I'll copy those and disseminate them to everybody. Indeed, I'm going to quickly put this back up on the screen because Becca referred to it a minute ago. On April 27th, a peace walk, take a stand against gun violence. The leadership for this event is that Mayor's Youth Leadership Council that I referred to a bit ago. But you see logos from the organizations that are supporting the young people in this event. Hoosiers Concern, I'm not quite sure who that is. I can't read it well enough. McCoy, Marion County Youth Violence Prevention Coalition, Students Demand Action, Mothers Demand Action, Indy Peace Fellowship, Peace Learning Center. Who is this that I can't read?
It's MYLC, the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council.
Thank you. Thank you. So please come out. It's at Martin Luther King Park, 601 East 17th Street. And it is an outdoor program and a walk around that neighborhood. So please join us. That may be the last thing, just to ask you to watch for upcoming forums. We don't do these on a regular basis. We try to do 3 or 4 of them a year. And we would be so happy if y'all would come back to future forums. We enjoy getting to know people. Several people here tonight whom we are meeting for the first time, and that is a great benefit to all of us, I think. So hope that you'll continue to do that. I think that's it. And it is just now exactly 8:30. Does anybody have anything to say before I hit the stop button?
One thing that we can answer, one of the early questions, how do I subscribe? What we will do is we will send you the link to Hoosiers Demand, Hoosiers for Democracy. We'll send you the link and you can just share that via email with your distribution list, and then individual people can make the decision whether or not they want to subscribe based upon getting that link. I think that's better than us preemptively subscribing you. That's how we got started. I told the president of the League of Women Voters that we just, like brazen hussies, signed up some of the people that we would hope would not unsubscribe immediately to just begin to build, the distribution list. But and it's growing. So that's how we will do that. So you all can have that link.
Yeah, we couldn't be more enthused about what you're trying to do. Anything else? This has been a great conversation.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
Thank you
David,
so
thank
much.
for your-
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you too.
All right.
Night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. all.
Bye-bye.
Good night, all. Bing.